لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين، صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعليهم أجمعين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما آمين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا بكم. I welcome you back to our live answer session. This is of course predominantly going to be focused on the Shafi'i School, meaning that questions related to matters of fiqh or Islamic law will be dealt with in accordance with the school of Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayh, inshaAllah ta'ala. So we have a few questions ahead of us, bi'idhnillah. Let's get straight into it. The first question is, if one has enough money for Hajj or for marriage, one of the two, then which one is more rewarded? طيب. So this question is going to be relative to the person asking the question. Certain individuals have to assess their situation, and based on the principles of Islamic law, they would have to make a decision. So in relation to this particular question, a person who wants to get married and also has the opportunity for Hajj, what should they do? An individual in this position is to look at his own circumstances and see where the fard lies with him or her. So for example, Hajj in today's context is something that you can only undertake if you have the means. That's always the case in the Sharia, but meaning that you have accreditation, you have your ticket in order, etc. If you have all the means to perform Hajj and it is time for Hajj, then Hajj is obligatory upon you according to the school of Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayh. However, at the same time, a person in the Shafi'i school is allowed to defer their Hajj, right? Provided that they understand that should they pass away before having completed it, they would be sinful for that. But they are allowed to postpone the Hajj. Marriage, on the other hand, is also different in terms of its ruling. So Hajj is only obligatory upon you if you fulfill the means, if you have the criteria in order to perform Hajj. Marriage is depending on your own situation once again. Do you have the financial means? So the questioner asked already if the person has enough money. But then, in addition to the financial means, do they have a hajah? Do they have the physical need to fulfill their desire in a halal manner? Or is it something that they can have sabr with and endure? So depending on the individual circumstances, the person would then have to decide whether marriage is a more pressing need or whether the criteria for Hajj was already fulfilled and they need to fulfill that Hajj. So there is no blanket ruling in this regard. It would depend on the individual circumstances. However, assuming or hypothetically speaking, if a person is in a situation where their need for marriage is high, but they also have a burning desire to go on Hajj and it is obligatory upon them, then looking at the basis of the Shafi'i school, because they can defer Hajj, because they have the ability to defer Hajj, right? Therefore, they will not be sinful. However, marriage, on the other hand, they may not have the ability to have sabr in relation to their physical need. So for such an individual, he would rather have to fulfill the sunnah of getting married, because it might be obligatory upon him under his circumstances, and then he can fulfill the Hajj later. As for reward, right, reward in terms of the fadail of Hajj, it's clear. لَيْسَ لَهُ جَزَاءٌ إِلَّا الْجَنَّةِ. There's no reward for a righteous Hajj except for Jannah. So that isn't a small need. But again, marriage isn't a small need either. And marriage comes with its own sets of reward. It's different acts of ibadah entirely. So once again, the person needs to look at the individual circumstances, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. The second issue that we address here is going to be about what does one do when you encounter a hadith that seemingly contradicts the madhab. So you're a student and you come across a hadith and the hadith appears to be contrary to what the madhab states. Now, it is very important that I emphasize here the student, because for a non-student to come across a hadith randomly, it's difficult for such an individual to even assess whether they should do anything about this or not, whether this is a hadith or not. But for a student, somebody pursuing sacred knowledge, and they come across a hadith, or even somebody who's not a formal student, but they understand the basics of Islam, so they understand what a hadith is. What does he do if he looks at the practice of the madhab? Like the madhab teaches X, Y, and Z, but this hadith seems to go contrary to that. What should a person do? This is an excellent question, and may Allah reward you for asking it. Firstly, it is critically important to highlight what one should not do. And what one should not do is assume that the madhab, which is not one particular person, remember a madhab is not the opinions of one scholar, like it's not Imam Shafi'i's rulings, but rather it is a school named after Imam Shafi'i, so he's the eponym of the madhab, who laid the foundations of the school. In other words, he laid the principles upon which the school is built and transmitted from, and thereafter hundreds of scholars would have contributed to that intellectual legacy by assessing the opinions of the Imam, revisiting the evidences, applying themselves, finding either that they agree with what he said or they disagree, etc. So they build on the school itself. So to assume that one has discovered a hadith that hundreds of the best scholars in the world, really, because those who make up a madhab, they would not be your run-of-the-mill average scholar. It would be intellectual giants who really adopted a particular intellectual legacy and then contributed to that as well. And the fact that they are renowned as senior scholars within a madhab in and of itself is a testimony to their level of scholarship and their erudition. So being an erudite scholar, you cannot dismiss the scholar. That's in the case of the one scholar. But now what happens when you have hundreds of scholars? You have an entire madhab. To assume that no scholar in the madhab has ever discovered that hadith, and I have discovered it, this is absurd. So Imam Nawawi, in his encyclopedic work on fiqh, Al-Majmu' Sharh al-Muhadhab, a commentary of Al-Muhadhab that was written by Imam al-Shirazi, Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, in his muqaddimah, in his introduction to the book, he quotes from Ibn Salah, who highlights what we should do. Now, some of what I'm about to say is going to apply only to scholars and students of deen, while others, perhaps can take a lesson from it as well. So he says, if you find a hadith that goes contrary to the madhab, then first find out what the madhab says about that particular hadith. Now, the classical example for, I think, the overwhelming majority of Shafi'i followers, the one instance of this that I've come across repeatedly again and again and again, because it's something that we deal with on a daily basis, is the issue of nawaqidul wudu. What breaks the wudu? So in the Shafi'i school, there's a very strict position that any touch between non-maharim members of the opposite sex, any touch between a man and a woman who are able to marry one another, whether that be a touch with desire or without desire, intentional or unintentional, that touch would break the wudu if it is skin on skin. Now, the other madhahib do not agree with this particular view. The Hanafi school regards practically no touch except the private parts touching one another to break the wudu. So touching doesn't break the wudu in the Hanafi school. The Maliki and the Hanbali schools, they view that not all touches would break the wudu. Some touches would break the wudu, some touches will not, depending on whether there is desire prevalent or whether there isn't any desire. So based on this, you can see that the madhahib differ. So now a student of deen comes across a hadith wherein the Prophet ﷺ, he is reported to have kissed one of his wives, namely Sayyida Aisha radiallahu anha, the narrator of the hadith, and then performed the salah and did not perform wudu. So meaning his salah was intact, so therefore his wudu must have been intact. So this hadith seemingly contradicts what the madhab says entirely. So if you take the wrong approach, it would be, the Shafi'i madhab is incorrect, and I've discovered this hadith for the first time, so I'm going to follow this hadith because I found it in a book and I saw a scholar say that it is authentic. So according to Ibn Salah, the first point of order would be find out what the madhab says about the hadith. And immediately therein you would find that in this particular instance, in this example, this is not a clear-cut authentic hadith. This is one of those ahadith where there's a 50-50 split. Some regard this, when I say some, I mean senior scholars from all different fields of Islamic law, regard this hadith as authentic. While on the other hand, senior scholars from all different fields of Islamic law regard this hadith as inauthentic. And the Shafi'i scholars predominantly regard it as inauthentic, along with Imam al-Bukhari and others. So that there already resolves the issue as to what this hadith means for me. Because when I discovered it, I thought this hadith seems to contradict my madhab. Therefore, I am going to find out what the madhab says about the hadith. So now I found out what the madhab says about the hadith. It says the hadith is not authentic. Is my problem resolved? For most people at this point, the answer is yes. Because especially in the case of a non-scholar, what more can one really expect as an answer, except that the scholars had mentioned they don't regard the hadith as authentic. For a scholar, however, especially one who has knowledge of authenticity of hadith and the like, jarh and ta'dil, they may find that the ijtihad, that the intellectual application of scholars who say that the hadith is authentic is more suitable to them. So in that case, they disagree with the scholars of the madhab and they believe that the hadith is authentic. So in that case, so what's the second step then? If a person finds out what the madhab says about the hadith and they are not satisfied with what the madhab says about the hadith, then the next ruling that Ibn Salah highlights is that the person should ask, are there suitably qualified mujtahidun, original thinking scholars, meaning scholars who are of the highest level of scholarship within Islamic law? Are there such scholars who have held this particular hadith and practiced upon it as is apparent from the meaning of the hadith? If so, then the person may follow that particular ruling, they may follow that particular they may follow that particular mujtahid, and there's no issue with it whatsoever. Why? Because remember, a madhab is a convenience. A madhab is a coherent system of following the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Azza wa Jal revealed to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wahi, divine revelation, in the form of the Quran and in the form of hadith. And that is what we are mukallaf with. We are duty bound to follow the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A madhab simply facilitates for our following the Quran and following the Sunnah. Otherwise, each and every individual would have to become experts in Islamic law, in the Arabic language, and in all the other sciences of Islam in order to decipher the messages of the Quran and the Sunnah. For non-scholars, this may seem unnecessary because all you need to do is read the book, read the translation, and then you have your answer. But it's not as simple as that. Any text is open to interpretation, it's open to authenticity, it's open to a number of other considerations. So a madhab facilitates that. But we are not mukallaf to follow any one particular madhab. It is, however, been the traditional system of Islam for centuries that instead of each person training to be an independent thinker, they would train within one system of coherent legal principles known as a madhab, and that way they can practice on the entire corpus of the Quran and the entire corpus of hadith, relying on the expertise of those who had in fact mastered those sciences. And now the person can feel at rest because they have followed, right, based on knowledge and based on trust, scholars who are worthy of being followed. So at this point, for the layman, in other words, for the non-scholar, this is about as far as he or she may go. Why? Because if there is no independent mujtahid, if there's no erudite scholar that they can follow who practices on the apparent meaning of this hadith, then there's really not much that they can do beyond that. For the scholar, however, for the, let's call it as an expert of sorts within Islam, he or she may find that they have the expertise to interpret the hadith or to determine its authenticity, but they did not find any mujtahid that practices on it. Imam al-Subuki then takes it further and says, then you may practice on the hadith if you have that expertise, because again, we are duty bound to follow the Quran and the Sunnah first and foremost through the lens of the madhab. So in this way, for the overwhelming majority of people, what this means is that if you come across a hadith that seemingly contradicts your madhab, the first thing that you should do as an individual is ask an expert of that particular school of thought, what does the madhab say about this hadith? Now, I use that one particular example, but there are many other examples, right? And then if you receive your answer, you should be satisfied by that, because the madhab is inevitably going to have an explanation, right? In the case of the hadith that we mentioned in our example, the explanation was related to authenticity. But there are other ahadith that many people are unaware of that also pose an apparent problem in relation to the Shafi'i school's position on what breaks the wudu. So for example, Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha is reported in a narration to have been looking for the Prophet ﷺ and feeling around, because it was dark and he was in salah. And her hand touched the bottom of his foot while he was in salah. And then she felt, okay, there he was. And he was in salah. So if this broke his wudu, he would have broken the prayer. So there again, you may come across this hadith and ask, so what does the Shafi madhab say about this? Then you read the books, especially the longer works like Al-Majmu' Sharh al-Muhaddab that deals with the evidence in great detail. And you will find therein that Imam Nawawi explains, look, nothing in this hadith is explicitly stating that there was skin-on-skin contact. There may have been a ha'il, a barrier, such as a khuf or the like. Another narration around the same issue is that when the Prophet ﷺ was praying, on occasion, he moved the leg of Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha out of the way so that he could prostrate. Remember, the living quarters were quite confined, they were quite small. So in relation to this particular narration, again you ask, okay, this seems to go contrary to what the Shafi'i madhab states. How should I understand this? How should I deal with this? So once more, we look at the madhab and we see what the madhab says, and Imam Nawawi once again will explain that again there's no explicit mention of skin-on-skin contact, and therefore this hadith is not enough to change the ruling of the Shafi'i school that skin-on-skin contact breaks. And the ruling that skin-on-skin contacts between marriageable kin breaks one's ablution is based not on the whim or the conjecture of any particular scholar. The primary ruling, the primary evidence is based on the narration, or rather the qira'ah of the ayah, أَوْلَا مَسْتُمُ النِّسَاء, or you touched your women, which could mean, it could be a reference to sexual intimacy, or it can be a reference to any form of touching depending on which recitation. So whether you say lamastumun nisa or la mastumun nisa, which are both valid forms of recitation based on the various qira'at or styles of reading the Quran. So this is just an example, but that would clarify again the issue of what one should do if you encounter a hadith that seemingly goes against the Shafi'i school. This is not necessarily going to be the case within the other madhahib, right? So you need to consult the experts of your particular madhab, if you're not following the Shafi'i school, to determine what exactly should be done under those circumstances if you find a hadith that seemingly goes against your school, and Allah knows best. However, I'd like to state that it's very important that we always follow the first principle. The first principle is general. If you come across a hadith that seemingly goes against the school that you subscribe to, for example, the Hanafi school, then you first have to ask, what does the madhab say about this particular hadith? The immature and non-scholarly approach would simply be to state, I found a hadith, someone said it is authentic, and it seems to go against my madhab, so therefore I'm going to follow the hadith because I only follow Quran and Sunnah. This notion is a very, very noble notion with sincere intentions, but it is expressed in a very superficial manner most of the time. Because if you really think about it, what does it mean when somebody says, I follow Quran and Sunnah and nothing else? It means that I have the ability to follow directly from the Quran and directly from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Laden in that claim is several other claims. That means I'm an expert in the Arabic language. I'm an independent mujtahid. I can think with original thinking. I'm a master of legal theory. I'm a master of the nuances in the Arabic language, so balagha or rhetoric. I understand the science of authenticity and therefore narrator criticism intrinsically. I know it inside and out. I understand the length and breadth of the content of hadith. So I know all of the ahadith around a particular issue. There's so many implications to that statement that for the most part, anyone who claims that needs to rethink their claim. So we all follow the Quran and the Sunnah. But generally speaking, what we mean thereby is our allegiance is to the Quran and the Sunnah, even though most Muslims don't have the direct access to the legal interpretation of the Quran and the Sunnah without an intermediary, without the assistance of any other scholars. That there is the oversimplification of a complex matter. And the complex matter is that following the Quran and the Sunnah, which is for every Muslim, consists of more than just reading a translation of the Quran and finding random ahadith or reading one book of hadith and following its literal interpretation. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best. طيب, so we move on to the next question. It's question number 3. How does the Shafi'i school address the issue of joining two prayers, jam', and shortening the prayers, qasr, while traveling, and the criteria for determining when this is permissible? So this is a practical question. I mean, we all deal with this at some point or the other in our lives because we travel, right? Kun fi dunya ka'annaka gharib. Be in this world as though you are a stranger. Or abiru sabil, or traveler passing through. And there's lots of lessons in traveling. And here I'd like to recommend that you sign up for Sheikh Faraz's classes in relation to travel. It's a beautiful class. I don't know the exact name of the class at this moment in time, but you can visit us on seekersguidance.org and register for that particular course there. I think it would be quite beneficial for everyone, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So what does the Shafi'i madhab say about a journey exactly? First and foremost, there are certain conditions for shortening the prayer while traveling. The conditions are, number one, that the trip must be legitimate. In other words, it must not be a journey that has a fundamental intention that is related to disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For example, a permissible journey would be a work trip or a trip for rejuvenation, right? Or a trip, for visiting scholars, etc. Those are all legitimate reasons to travel. An illegitimate reason would be a gambling trip, right? A trip that is going to be to go and see a particular concert, for example. Because the fundamental underlying reason for the trip would be unlawful and Allah knows best. So it must be a permissible journey. Number two, that the journey must be 80 kilometers, which is approximately 50 miles one way. Some say 81 kilometers, some say slightly less, slightly more, but 80 kilometers is fine. 80 kilometers or 50 miles one way. That the destination must be known. So it must be known where exactly you're going to. That the prayer, if you're going to join and shorten prayers, that the prayer must take place within the journey from the start to the finish while you are on the trip. That your intention to shorten the prayer must coincide with the opening Allahu Akbar. So if you're going to shorten the prayer, you cannot decide during a prayer that you've already started, I'm going to shorten this prayer. You need to have that decision from the get-go. No portion of the prayer may be performed while following an imam who's praying the full number of rak'at. So if you're on a journey and you come to a masjid and they are praying Salatul Dhuhr. So obviously they'll be praying Salatul Dhuhr without shortening it. So if you follow an imam praying the full salah, then you have to pray the full salah as well. If you are the imam yourself, right, and you are on a journey, you may shorten the prayer and then instruct those who are following you that they should complete their prayer as per normal. طيب. So this is the basics. Okay, there obviously are many other rulings in relation to this, and I'll mention a few more. You can only shorten prayers that are 4 rak'at, right? So Fajr cannot be shortened and Maghrib cannot be shortened. You can shorten Dhuhr to 2 rak'at, Asr to 2 rak'at, and you can also combine Dhuhr and Asr together, or Maghrib and Isha together. Again, Maghrib you cannot shorten, Isha you can shorten. How do you shorten the prayers? You simply pray 2 rak'at instead of 4 rak'at, and then you end off on that prayer. Joining the prayers can either be done during the waqt of the earlier prayer or the waqt of the later prayer. So for example, you can join a prayer, Dhuhr to Asr or Asr to Dhuhr, either in the time of Dhuhr or during the time of Asr. If you do so during the time of Dhuhr, then all good and well. You have to pray the 2 rak'at of Dhuhr and then immediately rise, say the Iqamah and pray the 2 rak'at of Asr. You cannot take a break in between the two or sit and recite adhkar and ada'iyah and so forth. They need to be successive, right? Immediately successive. If you're going to delay the prayer, so you delay Dhuhr till Asr's waqt, then you need to have the intention to do so during the time of the earlier prayer. So when it is the time for Dhuhr, you need to have the intention that I'm going to delay Dhuhr till the waqt of Asr for the sake of traveling. And then you may do so. If you do not have the intention to actually delay the prayer deliberately and the waqt expires, then you would be sinful for missing the prayer. And Allah knows best. When do you start praying? When do you end praying this particular prayer? So the beginning of your journey, if I leave my home now and I travel, I can pray shortened and joined prayers not from the time that I leave the home, but from the time that I leave the area. Now, there's differences of opinion in relation to what exactly constitutes the area. Here in Cape Town, South Africa, for example, the airport is generally taken as a landmark by scholars here. So therefore, when you reach the airport, by the time you reach the airport, you can already pray join prayers and shorten prayers, right? This will only apply to the prayers that become valid, that become current during your travel. Your ability to shorten and join prayers will continue until you reach a place wherein you intend to stay for more than 3 days. For more than 3 days, not 3 days, for more than 3 days. So if I reach, let's say my destination is Australia. The moment I arrive at my destination in Australia and I intend to stay there for 7 days, so that's more than 3 days, then the instant I actually arrive at my desired destination, from that point I need to pray full prayers and I need to pray them at the time that they were originally intended. If, however, I stay at places for less than 3 days and then I move on, I stay at a place less than 3 days, move on, stay at a place less than 3 days and move on, then I will continue to be a traveler because I haven't settled in any particular place for more than 3 days. Now, the way you count the 3-day story is you do not include the day of arrival and you do not include the day of departure. So if I arrive on a Monday, I don't include the Monday. I would count Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. If I depart on Friday, I don't count in Friday. So that is 3 days or more. That if I finish a full 3 days, then it's more than 3 days, and therefore I have to pray the full prayer from the time that I arrive at such a destination. If I'm staying for less than that, right? If I'm staying for less than that, then I would have the option of praying shorten prayers and join prayers for the entire time that I'm there. So let's say I'm flying from Cape Town, South Africa to Johannesburg, South Africa. And I only stay there from Monday. I arrive on Monday and I stay Tuesday, Wednesday, and I leave on Thursday. So how many days is that? I don't include Monday. I'm staying for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And I said I depart on Thursday. So technically I'm only staying there for 2 days. This would mean that for the entire duration of my stay there, I would be able to shorten prayers as well as join prayers together. Wallahu subhanahu wa ta'ala a'lam. So these are the basics. And of course, if you are interested in the details, there are 2 courses that I can recommend on Seeker's Guidance. The one is for beginners. It's called The Ship of Salvation, Safinatun Najah. And it's a current course, and we'll be continuing again from the beginning of the next semester, inshallah ta'ala. And you're welcome to register for that particular course at seekersguidance.org. And for more advanced students of the Shafi'i madhab, we have The Reliance of the Traveler, or Umdatul Salik, also taught by myself and Sheikh Muhammad Ka. And that course is also available for free. So do register for the details of that particular question, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. The next issue is that of innovation. The question reads, what are the rules governing innovation? Didn't the Prophet ﷺ strictly prohibit innovation? Excellent question, and of course very relevant for the time we find ourselves in, the month of Rabiul Awal, and you find that there's generally an annual controversy around the celebration of Mawlid, which is an example of an innovation. So this is one of the most contested issues within Sunni Islam, Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, because it deals with a very important concept, and the concept is in relation to new matters. New matters. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, he said, Inna sharra al-umuri muhdathatuha. Indeed, the most evil of matters are the new matters. Wa inna kulla muhdathatin bid'ah. And he said, and every new matter is an innovation. Wa kullu bid'atin dalala. And every innovation is a misguidance or an astrayness. Wa kulla dalalatin finnar. And every astrayness is in the fire. So from the apparent meaning of this hadith, as the questioner states, isn't every innovation unlawful or misguidance? Because that's the meaning that you get from the apparent meaning of the hadith. And it's a very difficult thing to explain, but the reality is that in Arabic, a general statement is never absolutely general. There's always going to be exceptions. So in relation to this, even though the wording seems so obvious, right? Every innovation, let's look at the way the scholars had discussed this and how they resolved this particular issue. So our scholars, starting from the time of Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayh, had analyzed this evidence and the other evidences as well to decipher what exactly was meant by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. First and foremost, if you take the general meaning unrestrictedly, this means that anything new, absolutely anything that the Prophet ﷺ did not teach us is automatically going to be bad, astrayness, and a cause to enter into the hellfire. Now already we know that this is not absolutely general because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he had no problem with new matters outside of the religion. Right? So outside of religious matters, for which he said, O kama qala alayhi salatu wasalam, Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fahuwa raddun. Whoever invents, whosoever invents, fi amrina hadha, in this matter of ours, meaning within the framework of Islam, ma laysa minhu, that which is not of it, fahuwa raddun, it will be rejected. Herein we now know that innovation outside of religious matters is not a problem. Obviously, they will be subject to the ahkam al-shar'iyya. So if you invent something, let's say a new device, a new piece of technology, etc., it would be assessed based on the ahkam of the sharia. Is it wajib, is it makruh, is it mubah, is it haram, etc. A new medicine, all of those things, new things will be assessed accordingly, as long as they're outside of religious matters. The problem comes in where he says, fi amrina hadha, in this matter of ours. Right? So that means within the religion of Islam. something that is claimed to be a religious practice, right? How do we judge those matters? So new matters within the religion. In that case, so again, from this hadith, our scholars of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah have looked at this and said, look, there's another exception mentioned here. Ma laysa minhu. The Prophet ﷺ added that which is not of it. Whosoever invents a matter in this religion of ours, and then he added that which is not of it. So from this, they inferred that not all bid'ah, not all newly invented or newly composed religious matters are necessarily evil. How so? So Imam Shafi'i rahmatullah alayh is known to be one of the earliest scholars to comment on this explicitly, and he said, Al-muhtathatu min al-umuri darban, that the new matters of religion, they are divided into two. And he said, this is, I'll read his words. I'll read his words exactly so that we can be on the same page, inshallah ta'ala. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Okay, let me sift through all of these scholars' opinions. So it starts with قال ابن العربي. Before we get to Imam Shafi, I've got this written as is, so I don't have to sift through it. ليست البدعة والمحدث مذمومين لللفظ بدعة ومحدث لا معنيهما إنما يذم من البدعة ما يخالف السنة. He says that which is reprehensible is that which is contradictory to the sunnah. ويذم من المحدثات ما دعا إلى الضلالة. And what is reprehensible of new matters is that which guides towards astrayness. Imam Nawawi in تهذيب الأسماء واللغات under the section با دال عين, he said البدعة بكسر الباء في الشرع هي إحداث ما لم يكن في عهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Bid'ah is that which is invented that was not in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وهي منقسمة إلى حسنة وقبيحة, and it is divided into good and ugly, or good and bad. قال الإمام الشيخ المجمع على إمامته على إمامته وجلالته وتمكنه في أنواع العلوم وبراعته أبو محمد عبد العزيز بن عبد السلام. So Izzuddin ibn Abd Salam. Izzuddin ibn Abd Salam is, as it says here, al-mujma' ala imamatihi. The entire ummah agrees that he was a great scholar. This is why he was called Sultanul Ulama, right? The sultan of the scholars. And he came up with a further division, right? So I said Imam Shafi'i, I couldn't find the text of his statement, but I remember his statement. He says, Al-muhdathatu min al-umuri darban. That newly invented matters are two categories. Either it is good, hasana, or it is evil, sayyi'ah, or madhmuma. And the way in which it would be determined whether something is praiseworthy or blameworthy is that it should be measured in light of the Sharia. So Izzuddin ibn Abd Salam further divided this category of either good or bad, and he said, Al-bid'atu munqasimatun, bid'ah is going to be divided ila wajiba wa muharrama wa manduba wa makruha wa mubaha. The same 5 legal rulings of the Sharia are going to apply here. So you'll measure a newly invented matter and they will fall according to one of those 5. And who does this? Of course, again, the scholars are the ones who are responsible for this type of assessment. The scholars would look at a particular practice. Now, this analysis, before we go any further in this question, this analysis, what justifies this analysis? How do we know that the Prophet ﷺ didn't just categorically state that every single type of innovation is problematic? Anything new in any form is problematic. Number one, the explanation of the hadith that I mentioned, ma laysa minhu, that whoever invents in this affair of Islam, of ours, something that is not of it is rejected. When he could have just said, whoever invents in Islam anything is rejected. Further, the Prophet ﷺ is also authentically reported to have said, Man sanna fil Islami sunnatan hasanatan, whosoever establishes a good way in Islam, will get the reward of it and the reward of those who follow after without diminishing anyone's reward in the least. And whosoever establishes an evil practice within Islam will get the sin of it as well as the sin of anyone who practices upon it after, without diminishing any of their sins in the least. Further, Sheikh Nuh Hamim Keller, a great contemporary Shafi'i scholar, in the 90s he delivered a lecture that has since then been turned into an article and also a book. The lecture as well as the article, I believe, is available on seekersguidance.org, and you can find it there, in which he explains that, look, there are several examples, right? And I have the article here as well, but it's too lengthy for us to go through the entire article. But there are several examples wherein the Prophet ﷺ during his lifetime is met with new things that he did not teach the Sahaba, but still praised the Sahaba for them. Some examples that come to mind immediately: the footsteps of Bilal in Jannah. Upon inquiry, he found that Sayyidina Bilal would perform 2 rak'at of salah after every wudu. He didn't get this instruction from the Prophet ﷺ, but he did that, and thereafter tahiyyatul wudu becomes part of the sunnah. A Sahabi stands behind the Prophet ﷺ and he says, the Prophet ﷺ says, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Generally, everyone says, Rabbana lakal hamd. The Sahabi adds, right there and then, a form of dhikr. He says, Mil as-samawati wa mil al-ardi wa mil ma baynahuma. And he adds words to this. The Prophet ﷺ turns around after the prayer, asks, who said this? Initially, the Sahabi is reluctant to state, but thereafter he states, and then the Prophet ﷺ says, well, I saw 30 angels racing to write these words down. Another example of a Sahabi reading Surah Al-Ikhlas, Qul Huwallahu Ahad, in every rak'ah of prayer after reciting another surah. So the Sahaba, again, they didn't receive this from the Prophet ﷺ, so they asked the Prophet ﷺ about it. The Prophet ﷺ asked the Sahabi about it, and he says, look, this surah reminds me of Ar-Rahman, and I love the surah. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, your love of the surah has entered you into Jannah. Another example is the Sahabi, Khubayb ibn al-Arat, who was about to be executed and requested from his executors that he wants to pray 2 raka'at sunnah. He had no opportunity to find out from the Prophet ﷺ if this is an established practice. It wasn't. He had no opportunity to get the go-ahead from Rasulullah ﷺ. And he went ahead with it. And now, forevermore, that is a sunnah, that if you are ever facing execution, you should pray 2 rak'at sunnah before that happens. Wal-'iyadhu billah, Allah protect us from that. And there are so many other examples of this. So we know that even though the hadith that we spoke about initially says every innovation, what we also know is that it certainly didn't mean every in an absolute sense, because of all of the examples that explain this. Now, the two camps in relation to this particular issue, on the one hand, you have the majority, Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the Madhahib al-Arba'a, the Shafi'i School, Hanbali School, Hanafi School, Maliki School, who all agree that there is a concept such as a good innovated matter within religion. And when they say this, they don't mean a completely new, completely foreign concept, because they categorize the different forms of bid'ah. So you get bid'ah al-haqiqi, a true innovation that has no basis whatsoever. For example, worshipping Allah by burning yourself with fire. There's no basis for that whatsoever. So that is an absolute innovation. And none of those scholars who say that there is such a thing as good innovation, none of them would agree to that. What is being referred to here by these scholars as a good innovation is what they refer to as al-bid'ah al-idafi, a innovation by attribution. So all of the practices that we mentioned by those Sahaba, they were all already part of the deen in some way, just not in the specific way that this particular Sahabi, in our previous examples, established. So for example, the famous one is when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anh, during his Khilafah, gathered all of the Sahaba who were performing individually prayer at night in the month of Ramadan. He gathered them behind Ubay ibn Ka'b, and he announced that there's going to be Taraweeh Salah, and then people prayed behind Ubay. So this isn't something new, unprecedented. praying is in our deen. Praying at night in Ramadan is in our deen. And standing behind an imam is in our deen. But the formalization of announcing that there's going to be Taraweeh every night and getting people behind one imam, announcing that, and then having this every night in Ramadan, this is new. So Sayyidina Umar responds and says, Ni'matul bid'ati hadhihi, or Ni'matul bid'atu hadhihi. What an excellent innovation this is. So this is the type of innovation that is being spoken about, and it has to be seen in light of the rules of the Sharia. If a practice is established and it contradicts the rules of the Sharia, all the scholars would reject that. But if the practice is just doing a already established act in the Sharia in a slightly different way, or in a way that prescribes a number or a time or a day or a place to that particular act based on experience or culture or whatever the case may be, this is when it is called al-bid'ah al-idafi. So this is let's call it an attributive form of innovation. So the action is there, it is originally there, it's not something brand new, but it's being done in a slightly new systematized way, and Allah knows best. So Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar al-Asqalani says, على ترك الجماعة في التراويح. ثم قال ابن شهاب في تتمة كلامه ثم كان الأمر على ذلك في خلاف أبي بكر صدرا من خلافة عمر رضي الله تعالى عنه. No, that's not the statement. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد. Yeah. This is إني أرى لو جمعت هؤلاء على قارئ واحد لكان أمثل. This idea of gathering the people around one reciter, this is what was new. ثم عزم فجمعهم على أبي بن كعب. And then Sayyidina Umar, he decided that Ubay ibn Ka'b would be the leader. ثم خرجت, then he came out. He says, I came out معه ليلة أخرى, and another night, والناس يصلون بصلاة قارئهم, and the people were praying. And then Sayyidina Umar said this particular statement. So this is the view of the traditional scholars of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Still, the original consideration is that newly invented matters by default is not ideal. It's not ideal because of the strong words against these matters by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, what he was referring to is bad innovation, problematic innovation, and this categorization of the scholars means that you don't take overarching statements like everything new is an innovation, but rather look, what new thing are you talking about? What does it consist of? Does it consist of permissible acts? Does it consist of encouraged acts? Does it consist of disliked acts? Does it consist of haram acts? And based on that, they would categorize the new practices. I hope I'm not leaving anything out. I found Imam Shafi'i's statement as well. He says, المحدثات من الأمور ضربان أحدهما ما أحدث وما أحدث يخالف كتابا أو سنة. Newly invented matters are of two types. One is that which is invented and contradicts the Quran and Sunnah, or أثرا, or a statement of the Sahaba, or إجماعا, or is against scholarly consensus. فهذه البدعة الضلالة. This is an astray innovation. والثاني ما أحدث من الخير. The second type is that which is invented, but it is good. لا خلاف فيه, there's no difference in it, لواحد من هذا, against any of the aforementioned Quran, Sunnah, Ijma' and practice of the Sahaba. فهذه محدثة غير مذمومة. So this is new, but it's not blameworthy. Why? Because it's in line with the principles of the Sharia. I found Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani's statement in Fath al-Bari. Now these are scholars that the entire Ummah agrees in terms of the reliability. And he narrates روى الحافظ أبو نعيم في كتابه حلية الأولياء عن إبراهيم ibn al-Junayd قال Hafidh ibn Hajar in Fath al-Bari quotes Imam Shafi'i. This one is again from Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. Al-bid'atu bid'atan, bid'atun mahmuda wa bid'atun madhmuma, fama wafaqa sunnah fahuwa mahmud. That which is in accordance with the sunnah is praiseworthy. وَمَا خَالَفَ السُنَّةِ, that which is in contradiction with the sunnah, فَهُوَ مَذْمُوم, that is blameworthy. وَاحْتَجَّ بِقَوْلِ عُمَرِ بْنِ الْخَطَّابِ فِي قِيَامِ رَمَضَانِ, and he cites as evidence the statement of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab that we mentioned earlier. So all of this represents, in general, the view of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And this is not only unique to the Shafi'i school, it occurs throughout the four madhahib. But that said, it is important to understand that still we have differences of opinion in the Ummah, as you know, that other scholars disagree and they say, no, there's no such thing as a good bid'ah. But I think it's essential to also understand the philosophy behind this approach, because of the amount of ikhtilaf and the amount of bad behavior that stems forth from it. Those who don't regard good innovation at all understand that this is born out of a concern for the preservation of the Sharia. That if we were to introduce and accept the introduction of new matters unrestrictedly, so today we invent stuff, tomorrow we invent more stuff, in 10 years' time, 100 years' time, 1,000 years' time, what is going to happen to Islam is whatever happened to the other religions. Wal-'iyadhu billah. So it's born out of that sentiment. And that's a very good sentiment because the preservation of Islam is essential. And in light of this, it's important that we highlight the difference between a sunnah, which is an established practice of the Prophet ﷺ, and a bid'ah, which is good, it's allowable, it's tolerable, but we will not raise it to the level of a sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sallam. The understanding of the scholars in terms of a detailed explanation, and not just an overriding dismissal of all good matters, is a mature intellectual approach based on the fact that, number one, we clearly see that it's not general in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Number two, we see that it is unavoidable. Inevitably, there are going to be new matters. And number three, the new matters can definitely assist in terms of the overarching principles of the Sharia. And where it does assist in that regard, and it follows the rules of Islam, they welcomed it. And Allah knows best. So, in essence, the question was, what are the rules governing innovation? The rules are that innovations are subject to the same rules, the same scrutiny that any other action is going to be subject to. It's either going to be haram, or it's going to be makruh, or it's going to be mubah, or it's going to be mustahab, or it's going to be fard. An example that they give of a fard innovation was the gathering of the Quran, right? Joining the whole Quran into one compilation with one particular script that would, unite everybody. And if you look at that particular incident in our history, and you can find this in the books of Ulum al-Quran, there you see the different approaches. Sayyidina Umar comes up with a suggestion. Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's immediate response is, how can I do something that the Prophet ﷺ never did? But Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is highlighting the fact that, look, this act of compiling the whole Quran, it's a needed act because, so many Hufadh died in a particular battle. So I fear that we might lose parts of this Quran. So let's gather this together. And only after some consultation and reassurance by the Sahaba did Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala and agree to that particular venture. So there you can see the two approaches already, right? So it's not something that's completely unwarranted. It is a genuine issue of interpretation of evidence. It existed during the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, even though they resolved the issues individually, and it still exists today. It is important that we don't allow these dhanni matters, because this is not something that falls within the scope of aqeedah. Where there's innovation in aqeedah, our scholars unanimously reject that. Any new matters invented in belief is basically always rejected. And this is where the original concept of Ahlul Bid'ah, people of Bid'ah, came from. And people of Bid'ah were those who invented new matters of belief. But in terms of practice, this is not a fundamental issue in Islamic law. If it was a clear-cut issue that had clear-cut evidence that's not open to interpretation, then it would have been something that we didn't have any differences of opinion on. But because it's open to interpretation and it's call it a secondary matter if you would, it falls within the ambit of probable knowledge, probable evidence, or dhann rajih. So in that, we do accept differences of opinion as long as those differences of opinion are based on sound reasoning from sound scholars and based upon evidence, of course. Therein, we will have to tolerate one another's differences as much as we tolerate the differences between the madhahib, because I don't believe that this is an issue that will ever be resolved in our lifetime or even during this world, but rather in the world hereafter. And there's no need for us to make a bigger deal of it than it already is. Follow the scholars, right? And follow the scholars who you trust and rely on. This is why we have madhahib. So if you follow the Shafi'i madhab, for example, you don't have to start, the process of thinking about this from scratch. The scholars have explained it for you, and you just basically have to study those opinions and make sense of it and become content with it, and you move on and respect those who have different views, right? Don't say that somebody who rejects a particular good innovation that you have accepted and that you love, and the most common one is for example, Mawlid al-Nabawi. So if you follow and you practice and you celebrate the Mawlid al-Nabawi, فَبِهَا وَنَعِمَتْ, there's evidence for it as far as the madhahib are concerned. Great scholars have permitted it. They've called it a good innovation. Bismillah. But at the same time, respect and love your brother who regards it to be a reprehensible innovation, who believes that it shouldn't be done. It's an astrayness, or it's not something that the Prophet ﷺ taught or practiced. He or she is approaching this from the perspective of their scholars who believed their motivation to be the preservation of deen. And that's a good motivation. That's a good notion. How we respond, individually, that's up to us. But what is always going to be required is for spiritual maturity and maturity as a whole, right? That we can be brothers and sisters in the deen of Islam and not allow these things to tear us apart. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. I hope and pray that this was of benefit, inshallah ta'ala. That's all we actually have time for in this particular session. I know for many, depending on where you are in the world, it is the 12th of Rabiul Awwal, or it will be very shortly. And people will be engaged in remembrance of the Prophet ﷺ and in salawat and in all sorts of good acts. Allow me to encourage each and everyone that whether you are celebrating Mawlid or not celebrating Mawlid, since everyone in the Muslim world, or the majority of Muslims in the Muslim world, are more conscious about the Prophet ﷺ during this time, let us use this time to connect to his sunnah, to connect to his way of life, to learn about him, and to spread knowledge of him and invite people to his way. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Subhanallah wa bihamdi. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.